All right, let's talk Don Quixote. You know the image, right? The super skinny guy with the beard going after a windmill on his horse. It's iconic. He's probably the most famous madman in, well, all of literature. But I'm telling you, behind that classic picture, there's a story that is so much deeper, so much more revolutionary than you could ever guess. So, how did this book, written over 400 years ago, become what so many people call the greatest novel of all time? Well, to figure that out, we've got to look past the windmills. We need to dig into the man who wrote it, the world he lived in, and how he basically invented a whole new way to tell a story. So first things first, let's meet the man himself. But if you're picturing some young, dashing hero, think again. Our guy is, something else entirely. Right out of the gate, the author, Miguel de Cervantes, just flips the script. The story starts in, well, a village of La Mancha, the name of which I have no desire to call to mind. Our hero, he's a 50-year-old dude, which was practically ancient back in the 17th century, and we don't even really know his name. He's just read way too many books about knights and chivalry, and they've literally broken his brain. So he decides, yep, I'm gonna be a knight.
And even the name he picks for himself is a joke. Quixote is a piece of thigh armor, sure, but it was also a bit of a dirty pun back then, kind of hinting at an old guy who, still thinks he's got it. It's this little piece of crude humor that tells you from the very beginning, this is not going to be your typical epic tale.
So yeah, the book is hilarious, but its real genius, the reason we're still talking about it, is how it completely changed the game of storytelling. It's more than just a funny send-up of night stories, it's basically the blueprint for every single novel that followed. Okay, and this example, it just perfectly nails the huge leap Cervantes made. See, before Don Quixote, stories were mostly just a list of things that happened. The king died, and then the queen died. That's a story. But Cervantes gave us plot. He connected the dots with real human psychology. So it's not just that the king and queen died, it's the king died, and then the queen died of grief. See the difference? All of a sudden, we're not just spectators. We're exploring the why. We're actually inside their heads. And that, right there, is the birth of the modern novel. It's the story of one person's inner world, all their dreams and hopes and crazy ideas, smashing right into the hard, cold reality of the outside world. And unlike all those fairy tales Quixote was obsessed with, this story doesn't end with happily ever after. It ends with a cold dose of reality. So you have to wonder, where does this funny but also kind of sad view of the world come from? Well, to get the book, you really have to get the man who wrote it. And let me tell you, if you think Don Quixote had a rough time, just wait till you hear about Cervantes. I mean, just listen to this guy's life. He joins the army, becomes this big war hero at the Battle of Lepanto, but gets shot 3 times and his left hand is useless for the rest of his life. Okay. Then, on his way home, pirates capture his ship. He gets sold into slavery in Algiers. He's a slave for 5 years and tries to escape 4 different times. When he finally gets ransomed and makes it back to Spain, what happens? He gets a crummy job as a tax collector and ends up in prison for messing up the books. He doesn't even publish his masterpiece until he's 58 years old, and even though it's a hit, he still dies broke. It's just one gut punch after another.
Out of that whole list of disasters, let's just pause on one thing. 5 years.
5 years as a slave. Can you even imagine the kind of grit that takes? The desperation? Think about the understanding of human suffering he must have gained. He saw both the highest ideals of a holy war and the absolute lowest reality of being treated like property. And here's the kicker, it was in prison, probably at the lowest point of his entire life, that he dreams up this story about a guy who escapes his disappointing reality by diving into a fantasy world. It's incredible. His own suffering became the raw material for his art. But it wasn't just Cervantes' personal life that was a walking contradiction. The entire country of Spain was living this strange paradox. On the outside, they were the biggest, most powerful empire on the planet. But underneath all that glitter, the whole thing was starting to rot. So on one hand, you have Spain's golden age. They've got this massive global empire with tons of gold and silver pouring in from the Americas that just finished the Reconquista, kicking the last of the Muslim rulers out of Spain after 700 years. The whole country's identity was built on being this military superpower with an unbreakable Catholic faith. But here's what Cervantes was actually seeing around him. All that money from the New World, it wasn't being invested. It was being thrown away on one pointless war after another. And in the name of religious purity, Spain kicked out all its Jewish and Muslim citizens, who happened to be their best merchants, doctors, and thinkers. It was a massive brain drain. The country became obsessed with pure blood instead of, actual talent. And then, the final humiliation. The Spanish Armada gets crushed. That shiny golden image was starting to look pretty tarnished. And this is where you see the deepest layer of the whole book. Don Quixote wasn't just some random crazy guy. He was a perfect metaphor for Spain itself, a nation totally obsessed with its own glorious past, clinging to these outdated ideas of honor, while being completely unable to deal with the real world that was changing all around it. So you take all of that and put it together. The absolutely hysterical main character, the brand new way of telling a story, the author's heartbreaking life, and this sharp critique of a whole empire in denial. And what you get is something truly timeless. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Back in 2002, the Nobel Institute did a survey. They asked 100 of the world's most famous, most celebrated authors a simple question: what is the single greatest work of fiction ever written? And the answer wasn't even close. By a huge margin, they chose Don Quixote, number one. Not too shabby for a story dreamed up in a jail cell by a broke, one-handed war vet. You hear a lot of literary experts say things like this, and it's true. Think about it. Any story about a dreamer, a flawed hero, the clash between what we wish for and what's real, or a story that pokes fun at society, you can trace its DNA right back to Don Quixote. Cervantes basically created the toolbox that writers are still using today. So why, after all this time, do we keep coming back to this story? I think it's because at its core, it's about a fight that every single one of us gets. It's about how beautiful and how dangerous it is to be an idealist. It's about the comedy and the tragedy of being a person who dreams big in a world that doesn't always play along. And that's really the question the book leaves us with, isn't it? When our big ideas crash into the hard truths of the world, what do? Do we give up, become cynical? Or do we, like Don Quixote, just keep charging ahead, even if everyone else thinks we look like a complete and utter fool? It's a question that's just as real today as it was in 1605. And it's why a madman who picked a fight with windmills is still the ultimate hero for our modern times.
All right, let's talk about Don Quixote. I'm sure you have a picture in your head, right? This super tall, kind of goofy-looking knight in beat-up armor. He's become this symbol for someone who means well but is, well, completely out of touch with reality. He's one of the most famous characters ever, but you know what? The story most of us think we know, that's barely half of it.
And this is the scene. This is the one everyone knows. A guy with a spear ready to charge a bunch of windmills because he's absolutely convinced they're giants. It's the perfect image of an idealist just lost in his own world. It's funny, yeah, but it's also kind of sad, and it's pretty much defined his entire legacy for over 400 years.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What if the author, Miguel de Cervantes, wasn't just writing about some crazy old dude? What if the madness was actually the whole point? A brilliant satirical tool he was using to make fun of the world around him and to say something way, way deeper about all of us. To really get what's going on, you have to realize that Cervantes was basically telling one giant, elaborate joke right from the first page. And the best part is, the punchlines are hidden in plain sight, in the names of our hero, his horse, and even where he's from. Let's break this down. Okay, so a legendary knight should come from some epic place, like Camelot, right? Well, Don Quixote is from La Mancha, a name that literally means the stain. It's basically saying he's from a boring, culturally stained, nothing special kind of place. It's like finding out Superman is actually from the puddle. The joke starts before he even gets on his horse.
And speaking of the horse, every hero needs a noble steed, but Don Quixote's horse, Rocinante, gets his name from the word Rocine, which just means an old nag or a tired-out workhorse. You see what Cervantes is doing? He's winking at us, telling us right away this isn't going to be some grand heroic tale. It's a parody, starring a rundown guy on a rundown horse.
And, oh, it doesn't stop there.
Even the woman he's doing all this for, the beautiful lady Dulcinea, her name is part of the gag too. It sounds all lovely like sweetness, but back then, it also kind of hinted at a woman of ill repute, the total opposite of the pure, noble lady a knight is supposed to fight for. Every single piece of his quest is a joke.
But here is the massive twist, the thing that makes this book an absolute masterpiece. If he's just a fool, why are we still obsessed with this story centuries later? It's because Cervantes created a character who's basically two people in one. A complete madman when it comes to action, but an absolute genius in how he thinks.
This is the core contradiction of the whole book. As soon as the topic isn't about knights and chivalry, the madness just evaporates. He becomes this brilliant philosopher, this incredibly sharp critic of society, a man who speaks with pure reason. Cervantes did this on purpose, you see, so he could sneak in these powerful ideas through the mouth of a guy everyone else just writes off as crazy.
And the split personality is what makes him so fascinating. So on one hand, yeah, he's charging in a flock of sheep because he thinks they're an invading army. But on the other hand, he's delivering these breathtaking speeches about a perfect golden age or freeing prisoners because he believes so deeply in human liberty. He's a clown and a philosopher, all at the same time. I mean, just listen to this. This is a piece of advice he gives his squire Sancho Panza on how to be a good leader. Does that sound like the ravings of a madman? No way. That is a deep, timeless, and incredibly humane argument for justice. It's a direct shot at a world where money and power always seem to win. But the story gets even wilder. So Cervantes publishes the first part of the book, and it's a smash hit. Everybody's reading it. So for part 2, he does something that nobody had ever done before, something absolutely revolutionary. He makes the characters in the book aware that they're famous.
Just think about how wild that is. Suddenly, Don Quixote and Sancho aren't just making up their own adventures anymore. The world starts creating fake adventures for them. Dukes and duchesses who've read the book invite them over just to mess with them, to play elaborate pranks. The line between his fantasy and the world's cruel reality just gets completely blurred. He wanted to live inside a story, and now he's trapped in one.
And right in the middle of all this chaos, we get this incredible character arc from his squire, Sancho Panza. He starts out as just this simple, down-to-earth guy. But then, as a joke, a duke makes him the governor of a town. And you know what happens? Sancho, who has been listening to all of Don Quixote's idealistic speeches, turns out to be an amazing ruler. He's fair, he's just, he's wise, and he proves that true nobility has nothing to do with your family and everything to do with your character.
But, you know, all dreams, no matter how grand, eventually have to end. The novel's conclusion is it's both beautiful and completely heartbreaking. It's the moment when Don Quixote's fantasy world finally comes crashing down for good.
See, he's not taken down by some huge monster or an evil wizard. He's defeated in a duel by a friend in disguise. And the condition of his defeat is that he has to promise to go home and give up being a knight. When he gets there, he gets sick with a fever. And when the fever finally breaks, so does his delusion. His sanity comes back, but it's almost like his reason for living just fades away with it.
And this is the final, heartbreaking irony. On his deathbed, he's not Don Quixote anymore. He's back to being Alonso Quijano. He rejects all his mad adventures, writes his will, and then he just passes away. The great knight is gone. All that's left is the quiet old man who dared to dream he could be one.
So, after all that, why are we still talking about this story of a silly old man? It's because in telling this story, Cervantes didn't just write a book. He basically invented a whole new way to tell stories. Seriously, Don Quixote is called the first modern novel for a reason. Before this, characters and stories were usually just symbols. But these characters, they're complicated, they contradict themselves, they grow and change. The book completely messes with our idea of what's real and what's imagination, and it uses humor to criticize society. At its heart, it's about that timeless fight between our beautiful, crazy ideals and the harsh, cynical world.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. You know, the word quixotic has come to mean being foolishly idealistic. But maybe, in a world that can feel pretty cynical sometimes, a little bit of that noble madness, that drive to fight for a better world, even if you're just charging at windmills, is exactly what we all need.